Yeah, let
seeing
me
that
do
map.
a brief introduction to Dan. Um, Dan, this was his third National Narrow Gauge Convention, but it was his first time as a clinic presenter. And so he's going to be able to bring a perspective of somebody that's relatively new to the National Narrow Gauge Convention. And it's going to be interesting just simply because Dan is also a professional railroader, and he's also a live steamer, and he's models an HON3. So I mean, we've got an individual here that covers everything from small to large. And I did sit on his clinic, and I thought it was really nice. So Dan, if you want to let us know what you thought was really cool about the convention, what you learned about attending and participating since your first one, and what it's like to be a first-time presenter, and any other thing you care to add, let's go.
There we go. Now I'm unmuted. Okay. I thought the Denver convention was one of the best of the three I have attended by far. It was very well put on. Much props goes to you, Chris, and everybody else involved. I had a great time. I'm sure everybody else did too. My first convention was when it was here in the Twin Cities in 2018. I went to Sacramento the following year, and I visited Dave's layout as part of that, and I really enjoyed that. Beyond that, I started building a URA branch layout last December, and I figured with a little bit of pushing from a couple of friends of mine that I would do a clinic on that at the Narrow Gauge Convention this year. And I had a great time putting it together. I had a great time putting it on. It really gave me a little bit of insight into how long it's been since I've done any kind of public speaking. But I had a great time doing it, and I've got a lot of really nice comments from a lot of really nice people that attended my clinic and really enjoyed it. So I thank everybody for attending the clinic if you did. And if you didn't, well, you guys can get in touch with me, and I got a Facebook page about my layout. Do I see more narrow gauge conventions in my future? Absolutely. 2026 for sure. I'm planning to have my layout open for the layout tours for that. And as far as the convention otherwise goes, I mean, yeah, I just had a great time. I'm sure everybody else did too. So anything else you want me to talk about, Dave?
Well, anything you want to, Dan. You might say is how much did you buy on the vendors hall?
Not as much as I would have thought. Narrowing my focus down to the URA branch kind of has narrowed down my focus on buying things. So that's been a definite help. But no, the vendors hall was great. The modular layouts are great. I really enjoyed seeing the Mud Hens layout, the largest one they've ever had. That was really nice to see. And then the pre-convention activities too were a lot of fun. I attended the Silverton Mix charter, the Durango and Silverton, and the Friends charter, the Cumbres and Toltec. And there were a little bit of issues one day of the Friends charter, the CNTS, but I boil it down just to mountain railroading. As a railroader myself, I know how things go. So you can't have a good day on the railroad every day. So, and for those of you who weren't there, the issue with the second day of the Friends charter was the 315 was a little bit over tonnage, and the sand wasn't getting down to the rail, so she was having a little bit of trouble that day.
Well, thanks, Dan. If there's anything else that you want to contribute, feel free to do that. If not, then we'll go ahead and I'll introduce Gerry Cornwell, who really needs no introduction, having been part of this this merry little band on the NNG since its inception here. But I will add that we picked Gerry to be the guy that's been to a lot of conventions to provide his perspective. In fact, Gerry allowed that he's been to over 36 of these national narrow gauge conventions, and so that's quite a number. I noticed this year was probably the first year that say Chris or whoever was heading up the convention didn't ask for a show of hands, starting with how many people have attended all national narrow gauge conventions. So I think that what that does is say our ranks, unfortunately, are starting to thin here after 43 years. So I think that that tradition is something that we would probably want to revive at the future conventions. Well, let's see, Gerry, what did you think was cool about this convention? Why have you attended so many of them? And has your motivation for attending conventions changed over the years? And lastly, do you have more fun as a clinician or as a vendor?
Well, that's a good question. I haven't decided yet. I think the answer to your question, Dave, is yes. So as Dave said, I've attended most of them since '83 was the first one I attended. So I totaled 36 so far, which is 84% of the conventions. I started in the 80s as a new narrow gauger. I was an HO standard gauge, and I went to narrow gauge because I met some extremely nasty people in Toronto who I'm still hanging around with 40 years later. And they dragged me into the kicking and screaming into the narrow gauge world. When I got involved with Mount Albert scale lumber in the 90s, I started attending as a vendor, and that gave me a different perspective. It was interesting because I wasn't just going for my own enjoyment and for fun. I was actually going because I had a business to manage and to promote. So it became an interesting shift in my approach to the conventions and the way I thought about them. I started thinking much more about the costs and how it applied to what our payback was in terms of sales, that kind of thing. So it does change your perspective, certainly. I wouldn't say it's less enjoyable. I think being a vendor at a convention is fun. I get to meet my customers in person. So that's one side of it. The other side is doing clinics, and I agree with Dan. I think doing clinics really, once again, opens your eyes more. It enables you to help people, which is fun. I've done a lot of teaching in my life, and as a lighting designer, pretty much all lighting designers end up doing a certain amount of teaching. Because it's a subject that everybody pretends they know about and nobody does. So I've done clinics on layout lighting, working with wood, of course, and also I used to be the PFM service guy in Canada. So I also did a couple of clinics on maintaining the PFM sound systems, which was fun. I seem to recall one in which I terrified Charlie Getz by taking a PFM system apart in front of him and held up with the cables and things all dangling down. he said, "I'm going to run screaming from the room now." So when I was involved with Mount Albert, I became we became an annual sponsor of the conventions, and we also give an annual award, and we've continued that tradition also in Denver, and we'll plan to continue that. What I thought was neat about this convention was a couple things. One is Colorado. I mean, it's the heart of narrow gauge, really, in North America, and particularly Western narrow gauge. This was our 13th Colorado convention, which is 30% of the conventions have been in Colorado, which is pretty amazing. I think the best part for me in this convention was the contest room. Probably one of the best I've ever seen. Not only the quantity, but also the quality. There was a very broad range of subjects. This photograph, by the way, you're looking at, I think that is spectacular. There was a very broad range of subjects. There were some really inspired animations and really great presentation. This model here, we gave the Mount Albert Award to. It had an operating a belt drive system, which was, amazing, really. Something that's only a fairly recent addition to the conventions is the idea of animation in our models, and it's really exceptional. And the room was well lit for a change. Quite often the contest rooms suffer from really poor lighting, and you can't really see the models well. And this room was an exception in that it was reasonably well lit. Another thing that I really enjoyed, I was involved with our group in Toronto with modules for several years, and some of you may have seen our Dolores modules. The last time we showed those was at Minneapolis. And we won first prize for the modules at that time. We've since sold those modules. But it's really, I'm now fascinated by modules, and I want to see how people do them. And I saw some really intriguing and interesting approaches to, for example, adjustable legs at the convention. And the other thing that I saw that really interested me was the fact we had quite a lot of young people running trains on the modules, which is really great to see and unusual. You know, it's really nice to see people that aren't using walkers to get around at the convention, and it's a nice change. So, and it's really a note to all of us to encourage our younger relatives, grandchildren, whatever, to get engaged in the hobby. It's really nice to meet Dan at the convention and see somebody younger at last that's fascinated by this interesting hobby. The convention committee was really easy to deal with and helpful at all times. I had no problems with anybody. Everybody was really keen to help us and sort problems out for us and that kind of thing. The conventions for me became really the best way to maintain relationships with with Mount Albert's biggest customers, the kit manufacturers. And so many of these turned into long-term friendships, including, of course, the late Roger Malinowski. We had, it was interesting at the convention to see that he received a fellow of the, can't remember the name of it now. Somebody help me here. Received an award from Jimmy
Hall of Fame.
Is it? Thank you, the Narrow Gauge Hall of Fame. Yeah, that slipped out of my mind there for a moment. Now that Fast Tracks owns Mount Albert, my role has changed somewhat, and I now represent the Fast Track product lines at the conventions. Tim Warris at Fast Tracks doesn't really like doing conventions very much, so he'd much rather be in the shop amending things and fixing things and coming up with new ideas. So it's a good opportunity for us to test the waters with new products and introduce kits and various other things that we're doing. So Dave asked if I enjoy being a vendor or a clinician more. And as I said, only half joking, the answer is yes. So both those roles I found have their ups and their downs. Being a vendor is great because I really get to meet my customers in person instead of by email. And that is, much more rewarding, I think. You get to meet the person and really see and understand the person, which is great. The hours are long. And I understand that in Pittsburgh next year, they're going to actually change the schedule to make it a little less onerous on us older guys who have businesses to attend to. The 12 and 14-hour days are getting outside of my skill set. So it's nice to see we'll be doing a more normal daytime hours. It'll be interesting to see how that works out too. And in terms of doing clinics, as Dan noted, it's a lot of work. I mean, you've really got to be prepped, and you've got to have all of your stuff, and you've got to have your props, and you've got to have photographs if you're using them, all that kind of stuff you have to go through. But on the other hand, you get to help someone discover a new technique or a new skill, which is always rewarding. So to wrap up, the only disappointment for me on this trip was I also didn't get COVID, but I got a really bad head cold. I think I got it on the plane because I had symptoms on late Thursday, early Friday. So 3 days, typical gestation for a bug like that. So our rest of our trip was canceled, though. So we didn't get to go down to Durango and Chama and Santa Fe. So next time. I am looking forward to meeting some of you in person in Pittsburgh, and I really enjoyed meeting the people who were at Denver a week ago. So thanks. See you again.
Well, thank you, Gerry. I think at this point, Dan, I'll give you another shot if you've got anything else you'd like to contribute.
I just want to reiterate something Gerry said about the younger folks at the convention. I thought it was great to see so many other younger folks at the convention too. It was really nice to see, and that was one thing that Gerry brought up that I thought was great too. So
Yeah, I sure support that. One of the things that I was really pleased with, one of the engineers off the DNS attended the convention, and he brought his 5-year-old son with him.
Yep.
And they
John
just
Todd.
had a great
Yep.
time. Yeah, that was just super. So all the concern about the hobby is dying is if you attended the convention or you hit the Durango and Silverton or the Cumbers and Toltec, there's a lot of young people involved in this in this railroad hobby, if you will, in the larger sense. So I think I think overall it was a great convention. I'm certainly glad I attended, and I enjoyed every minute, even though one day I was so worn out, I didn't go layout touring and I had to take a nap instead. But it was absolutely wonderful.
If I could make a couple points on the young people, Dave.
Yeah.
If you attended 2017, hopefully you noticed that we had a pretty decent amount of young people, and we solicited them again. We worked very hard to bring younger narrow gauge modelers in, and let me relate a personal story, and so you can understand why. The one of the first conventions here in Denver, 1977, I actually attended that as a 17-year-old high school kid. And I mean, I was really welcomed in by the fraternity. Everybody, of course, called me the kid because I was back then. And, you know, I looked around the room during the awards thing and you know, on some levels, I'm still the kid at 61. But I mean, I've joked, but the fact of the matter is we do need those young people in, and we didn't advertise it or anything, but anyone that someone who registered wanted to bring under the age of 18, we let them in absolutely free for that reason. Because again, I'm hoping that a couple of these young guys are future me's and future you's and future other, you know, leaders or prominent people in the narrow gauge things, because that's how it perpetuates. So we felt very strongly about bringing young people in. And we also felt very strongly about, you know, any women that were railroaders that attended, making sure that they were treated as, I hate to use the expression, but one of the boys, just that there was no difference there. And as if you looked around carefully, which I did as one of the organizers, we had a seriously diverse group of attendees. We had all kinds of nationalities, all kinds of colors, all kinds of genders, everything. You know, we were a good slice of society, which is what we'd hoped to be, all brought together by our common love of railroading and specifically narrow gauge railroading. So in that respect, I'm really proud of what we were able to do as a group. I forgot, and I put it in the direct messages, or excuse me, in the chat, but I forgot to mention Dwayne Richardson as one of the committee members, and shame on me. Dwayne Richardson killed himself putting together that great contest room that you saw, and his volunteers were there until the wee hours counting up. If you have 1,066 people in there, that's a whole lot of ballots, and they were counting them manually. And yeah, we delivered pizza and everything. I appreciate that Gerry noticed the good lighting in there. We specifically asked the hotel, as they were upgrading lighting, we said, that is our contest room. Get the new lights in there as soon as you can. And they did. They got them in there about 4 months before the convention, and it made a big difference. Lighting is critical in the contest room, and we were very pleased with the table height, which allows people to see the models up close without sticking their giant caboose out in the aisle, bending over, and putting them a little closer to eye level, and putting them, honestly, you know, Gerry knows lumens drop off in distance. So being, you know, 18 inches closer to the lights makes the lighting just that much better.